Hi, in this particular segment I'll talk about the definitions of audits and assessments and have a look at why anybody would bother doing them. Now, the definition of an audit, according to, I think it was the Oxford English Dictionary, is an official examination of accounts with verification by reference to witnesses and vouchers. The note there is that originally accounts were oral accounts, they weren't written accounts, they're just oral. And that's why you get audited, someone who listens audit. In business, an audit is an evaluation, especially a formal systematic review of the effectiveness of the management, working practices and procedures of a company or other professional body, usually conducted by independent auditors or external consultants. So it's not necessarily a financial audit. An assessment, on the other hand, is not an examination against a set of requirements. An assessment is a judgment by an expert. Now, usually that assessment has some form of model or expectations against which the domain is assessed. And we'll deal with that when we get to it. So the comparison is an audit is usually an examination against declared or defined criteria. For example, a financial audit against the rules of accounting, ISO 9001, audit against the requirements of ISO 9001, or a COVID audit against the COVID requirements. An assessment is a judgment by an expert. The expert has discretion over the interpretation of the requirements, usually because the situation makes a difference about how it should be interpreted. And the expert is there to say, well, this is appropriate in these circumstances, or it's not, one or the other. Anyway, the expert has discretion about the interpretation of the requirement to determine whether or not the requirement has been met. In practice, though, there's actually very little difference between them. Usually, both of them have some set of definition, some set of checklist or requirements that are supposed to be met, and there's somebody with their expertise looking at whether you've met them or not. Now, quality management systems or quality management standards are an accumulation of knowledge. Usually they try to express the accumulated knowledge about reliable ways of achieving something. So ISO 9001 is fairly succinct, but unfortunately also very general knowledge about how to achieve quality, that is a dependable set of attributes in a product, for almost any product. And being for almost any product, they've got to be fairly general, but that's a different matter. But there are a growing number of standards concerning general quality, there's a growing number of specific standards, either interpreting ISO 9001 or in addition to it. One that I can think of is IEC 62628, which is guidance on software aspects of dependability. Now, IEC is the International Electrotechnical Commission, as opposed to ISO, which is the International Standards Organization. IEC has a background of electrical engineers or electrical engineering, and they have come at this problem of dependability because they had a whole lot of standards about dependability of electronic devices or dependability about devices. And gradually, as electronics implemented some of their functionality in software, IEC decided that it better do something about requirements for the reliability or predictability of this software in their devices. How did the software affect the reliability of the devices, and what requirements should be on that software in order to assure the reliability of it all. There are also a growing number of standards for governance and management of enterprises. An example is COVID, is one. Generally, though, the idea is you start with the general standard and you modify it to suit the circumstance. And this is what was done with ISO 9001. Now, what are the causes of poor quality? If we know so much about how to produce good quality, how come we still produce poor quality, and why does an audit or assessment help? Well, in practice, The same symptoms can arise from a number of causes. So the fact that you've got a symptom, it doesn't necessarily mean that you know exactly what's producing that cause. Particularly, there is some dispute about models of failure, and the current one that's used is a linear model, or a trace backward trace, where you go looking for the event that passes the but-for test. That is, but for this event, the accident would not have happened. So you try and trace back to the first assignable cause of the accident. However, there is argument that problems can be systemic rather than directly caused, and if they're systemic, it's foolish to point to a specific cause. So that's one circumstance. Another problem in poor quality is that some treatments can be ineffective in some circumstances, and another problem is that some treatments can be difficult for the organisation to implement. So these are the kinds of things that crop up as problems in quality management that in some ways we're trying to identify through assessments and audits. Now, why bother? I mean, usually the reputation of audits is that they're an absolute pain. You get somebody comes along and they disrupt everything, they look at everything, they ask all sorts of questions that sometimes seem ludicrous, and they come back with all sorts of advice that difficult to implement, and with a reputation of being somewhat inconsiderate about it all. So why would you bother with it? Well, the answer is that most systems, whether that's a production system or a defense system or a device or something, most systems do tend to drift toward failure. Left alone, that is without some form of external interruption, it will tend to drift to a state where almost anything would cause it to fail. Now, we see this time and time again, where people become very accustomed to what's going on, they get very comfortable that nothing bad has happened, and before you know it, there is another accident. So the whole idea of an audit or an assessment is to provide that external stimulus to re-examine the current state of things and to identify potential causes of problems. And in this case, we're talking about quality. So we're looking for potential causes of drops in quality or poor quality. So that's why you bother. The other reason why you bother is because it provides an open and transparent examination, as opposed to our own judgment, which tends to be a little bit biased, if you put it that way. And like almost any healthy endeavour, we need some external independent test of the state of things. So that's why you bother with an audit. Obviously, the very genuine organisations do welcome them, even though they might be disruptive. The less genuine organisations tolerate them because they're required to.